Hey, welcome back. I'm trying to provide feedback for the closed alpha 8 patch notes that came out Friday. Generally, I am happy about the problems that they've identified and are looking to address. I'm just not as excited about how they plan on addressing these problems. Their focus is on how impactful CC is, as well as reducing the oppression of cooldown, which is great. That is what they should be focusing on. Those are the major problems in Smite 2 right now. And the god changes that they made towards that are mostly positive, reducing the damage of consigned spirits for Baron and removing the cooldown reduction per level in the CC. It's a good start. The Danza buff is great, just to help Danza along, but the hurt buff is where I started to get a little worried. They're upgrading the damage on Herc because mages are too strong and they've been pushing damage dealing warriors out of the solo lane. So they're increasing the damage on Herc. And okay, whatever, that's fine. Herc ultimate should hit harder. It's a big old boulder falling on your head, whatever. We'll keep talking about the mage problem later on, but let's keep going with the god stuff right now. I am excited about the base cooldown increases that they're going for, as well as the reducing the buffs that abilities give. Like for example, Nuwa, they reduced the fog buff duration, the movement speed and all that. They reduced the duration from a 5 to 4 seconds, which is good, but I think they could have reduced it to 3 seconds, given that you can refresh the buff duration by walking back into the fog. And, you know, once you're in the fog, you're already stealthed. I don't know. Anyway, whatever. Poseidon is getting cooldown parity to Smite 1, so that's perfect. Great. It's a start, anyway. I still think he's going to be oppressive. I think that his +1 calls for longer cooldowns. Or maybe even, like, if you use the enhanced one, then it's on a longer cooldown. But, whatever. Smite 1 parity, better than we were before. Sobek is where this patch starts getting interesting. I'm glad to see that they understand the flaw in their design philosophy that they were talking about with CC when it comes to transferring from Smite 1 to Smite 2. They said that they wanted to reduce the amount of CC or the duration in Smite 2. However, many problematic CCs from Smite 1 are hardlocked. Most CCs are knockups and pulls that can't really be reduced in duration. For example, like, think when they bring over Sylvanas, right? If they don't change his pull, that pull is going to bring you from wherever it grabs you to in front of Sylvanas. You can't change where it leaves you, or it's going to change the entire ability. You can't make the pull faster or slower, or it'll impact the way the ability feels. And the feeling of abilities like that is super iconic. You know, everybody's used to when Sylvanas pulls, the timing of when you can start doing damage to that character that he pulled. So the only thing you can really do is increase the cooldowns, which is not a fun solution. Other things that you could do, in my opinion, is reduce the effects around the ability. Like, let's go back to Sobek, right? I don't have an issue with Sobek spamming his fun ability every 7 seconds. I don't care that it does CC. My problem is with how much damage and utility that fun ability has. Charge Prey would still be a super fun ability if it less damage or had more counterplay, like not making Sobek displacement immune or crowd control immune when it hits. You could increase the counterplay to the ability and still let him spam it and make it seem not as oppressive. The Susano change, I don't have a very strong opinion, but there is like if they're going to make his kit easier to hit or easier to utilize to its fullest, like sure, if you were better at auto-canceling, you could do faster damage, but it seems strange that they see something that is achievable, right? Like, I'm talking about high-res. The high-res sees that, let's say, pro players can utilize the passive of Susanoo's auto attacks now. They can do it, so it is possible, and they see that other players can't, and they go, we need to help those other players. If I was one of the players who couldn't correctly do the auto attack cancels, I would be sitting here thinking, wow, if I get better at this god, then I will be better and I'll do more damage. And there's like a thing here that I could reach if my skill gets better, instead of just, oh, it's my first time playing Susanoo and I can correctly use his passive, because there's so much time between the abilities and the auto attack duration that it doesn't even matter, right? So I'm a little bit worried about that, about making players feel content and thinking that that's as far as the kit can go. I think it's positive to have things that at first, when you first play the god, you might not know how to do correctly, and then as you play him, you get better at him, you know? It's not that big a deal because, you know, like I said, if you auto attack faster, then you do deal more damage. So it's not that big. It's a small nitpick. The bigger problem with Susanoo is that they did not give him a damage nerf. And I know the Susanoo mains are going to be pissed, but AoE based characters should not be good at 1v1 trades. They maybe shouldn't auto lose at 1v1 trades, but they should definitely have to outplay the single target damage god to win that fight. If you have AoE abilities, your strength should be in doing AoE damage, not AoE damage to one person. Whatever. Last of the god changes I'll talk about is the emoji nerf, which I don't really understand. Since they showed a chart earlier of like most gods played and performing and all that, and Yamojo was like near the bottom, so it's weird that they would nerf her, but I understand that people have been complaining about shields. To me, this just seems heavy-handed since she is not a high-performing character, and they're planning to introduce the shield reduction item in this patch, but whatever. Moving on to the items. I don't want to go over all the item changes, but I do want to point out Bracer. Bracer is another thing I'm torn on. On one hand, removing the cooldown from an item that didn't really need it is a good thing. It didn't really fit the item. It just kind of seems slapped on there just to give it something good, you know? But reducing the uniqueness of the item by turning the passive into something that would be good for what my image of what a healthy mage ADC is, which is a god who uses their abilities to facilitate their auto attacks, into a passive that would be good on basically anybody, is kind of lame. Now, the passive for Bracer is activated on auto attacks as well as abilities, meaning it works on everyone, regardless of if they are traditional hunters or ability-based magical hunters. If you have intelligence scaling and you want to hit harders with your autos, you just build Bracer. Whereas before, it was a very specific thing, right? Like with Izanami, for example, she was really good with Bracer, because it stacked when you used your 1. If you auto-attacked while your 1 was active, every auto-attack gave you a stack on Bracer. Now, Bracer is good on Izanami because she has auto-attacks and she has intelligence scaling. She doesn't need to use her abilities to stack the item. She doesn't have to use any synergy. You deal damage and now you deal more damage. Which is pretty lame in my opinion. Then they generally, this is probably the worst part, okay? They generally reduced the cooldown of all cooldown items, except Gem of Focus, which got a shift, which is fine. But to me, that is the least fun way to address the cooldown issue is in Smite 2. I want to have a 3-second rotation on Chalk. I want Sobek to use Charge Spray every 7 seconds. The problem is that they need to do less damage than when they have such low cooldowns. You need to reduce the base damage on low cooldown abilities, especially if they have utility. You need to increase their scaling from items and then heavily reduce the power stat from cooldown items, both from strength and intelligence items. That way, if you want your ability to deal heavy damage, you have to build damage items. If you want really low cooldowns, you build cooldown items, but you're not going to be doing that much damage. Removing the movement speed from Gem of Focus is a good change. Reducing the damage the Glad Shield does, it's a good change. Basically, everything that isn't cooldown was a really good change. And don't get me wrong, the changes that they did to cooldown might even address the problem. It might fix the cooldown spam, but it's a less fun world where I can't cooldown spam. I just want the cooldown spam to be more balanced. I don't want it gone. You know, the changes to Helm of Darkness are great. Adding more utility to items that aren't being bought is great. The healing on Eye of the Storm, for example, just makes sense to me. That's like the least bought item in the entire game. I remember when it first came out, a guy was fighting me. I think they were Amaterasu, and they were fighting me as Cern, and they killed themselves, basically. You know, I hit them like twice, and then they killed themselves with an item. It's so dumb. Phantom Shell needs to just be removed and made an active item. I've heard other people say that the Sunder should also be moved to an active item, and I 100% disagree. Sunder should just be removed from the game entirely. I don't know who's out here who wants a hog meta back, but I, for one, detest Hand of the Gods, or Sunder, or whatever they want to call it. Do not make buff secure on an item. Don't make a dedicated buff secure button. It's lame, and it leads to level 1 invades, which, while they're super fun to watch on SPL, they're super cancer for the game. Smite has a casual audience. Deal with it. I feel like this might be a very unpopular opinion, since everybody just parrots what other people say, but Invader's Curse is the healthiest thing that Smite 1 ever did. It was great. The game was terrible before that with the amount of invades. It was dumb. There were games where you just traded buffs because it was obvious everybody was invading, so you just switch sides. And like, what the fuck? What the fuck are we doing? I'm excited for the new items. I think that they'll fit into Smite 2 pretty well, and the Asclepios active seems a bit necessary with how much anti-heal that there should theoretically be in every game, even though there isn't. But it's still kind of just a stat active, you know, which is boring and not fun. I don't want my actives to give stats. I want my actives to do active things. Stats are passives, and putting them on a cooldown button doesn't make them fun. Circe's, Dominion, Screeching Gargoyle, Sunbeam Bow, those are fun active items. Avatars, it's a really good item, but it's not a fun active. It's the same with Dagger of It's the same with Dagger of Frenzy. It's a really good item, but it's hella boring to press a button and get stats. That's boring. The new item, Arrow's Bow, I'm confused. Not on what the item does, I get that. I'm confused as to why it has a 10-second duration and a 10-second cooldown. All you did was give me a button that I have to press every 10 seconds. Maybe they don't want you to be able to change who you target freely, but it seems odd that those timers match. Like, if they only wanted one mark applied at a time, it seems sketchy that this was the solution they went for instead of making the mark be removed from whoever it is applied to if you apply it to someone else. Especially given that Afro has this tech in her ultimate, I just don't understand the decision. I don't really want a button that I'm going to want to press every 10 seconds, you know? There's already, like, 3 of those, I guess, in my abilities that I'm generally using within the 3 or the 10 seconds. So I don't want a button that's like, every 10 seconds I'm gonna press it. They then reiterated that they want trade-offs when picking mage solo over like a warrior solo, but the problem with mage solos is that they do too much damage and have too much utility. Their cooldowns are too low. Even with the cooldown nerfs, I don't see it making that large of an impact, because Hecate is going to go from having like a 3.5 second ability rotation to a 4.5 second ability rotation and still do the same amount of damage. Raw still gets to build protections and cooldown and hit as hard as ever since his base numbers aren't touched. You need to force damage dealers to build damage items to do damage. Lastly, I want to talk about the phrasing they keep using. Kilgoon says, "We want gods to be played everywhere." And then he goes on to say that mages should be able to play solo and blah 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 blah. The impression that this gives off is that Khepri should be able to be played ADC. And I know that they don't think Khepri should be able to be played ADC, because even when they talk about Cupid's support, which makes a shit ton more sense than Khepri ADC, they're like, oh, you know, I won't will Cupid support into existence, but like if you want to try it, if you want to have some fun, you know, it's very clear that they understand that Cupid is not a support, that he doesn't do well in support, and that he doesn't have a kit for support. Cupid, like, people are trying to make Cupid a support because he has a heal, but he has no peel. His only peel is his ultimate. His one is a stun after like 3 or 4 seconds, and only if you have the stacks on your passive. It's not Cupid. Look, I'm going to play Cupid support. You will see me out there playing Cupid support. Does that mean I think he's good and that he should be played support? Fuck no! And that's exactly what you're pushing with comments like, "We want gods to be played everywhere," instead of saying things like, "We want gods to be played in a larger role pool than they could before, where it makes sense." Like, Khepri might be a better solo now, and I personally think that's very debatable. I don't see what makes Khepri a good solo now. Like, the only time Khepri was ever a good solo was when in Smite 1, when there was a bunch of items that just facilitated it, like Hide of the Urchin and stuff. But Khepri's kit is too support oriented to ever be an ADC. The only way you will ever make Khepri played in ADC is if you make his autos and abilities hit so hard that you're basically trolling if you don't build Khepri damage even in support role. Because why would you build protections if you can just murder the enemy? When your kit is entirely focused around crowd control, peel, safety of your teammates, you can't deal enough damage to murder the enemy team, because then you do it all. And at that point, it becomes, well, Khepri in every fucking lane. And they even talk about how they don't want that to happen. They don't want, like, one selection of gods to be the best in every role. But that's the only way. You can't balance crowd control and support abilities and also make it to where he's good enough to deal damage, unless they actually want to have unique scalings. But they don't. They could make it to where the more protections you build, the longer Khepri pull is, but they don't want to do that because the community, the people that watch this live, are going to bitch if the feel of the ability is any different from Smite 1. And if that's the case, if you're not willing to make the god feel different, then stop saying that every god can be played in every role when it's just not true. You're trolling the community. Stop it. Look, overall, I am excited about the pace of development. I am excited that they are identifying the same problems that I see in the game, and though they're trying to take a different approach than I would prefer, I'm certain that Smite 2 is and will continue to be better than Smite 1 ever was. Smite 1 has had way worse issues than Smite 2 is currently facing. Whether that be balance related, bug related, you name it. Smite 1 has been through much worse than what Smite 2 has gone through. So I just wanted to So I just wanted to provide my feedback to the closed alpha 8 patch notes, since they ended the stream by asking for feedback. And that was that. Anyways, thanks you guys for watching. I think the Smite 2 team is amazing. They're doing a great job. Smite 2 is fun. Go play it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.
You are my friend. あの日の夢今でもまだ忘れてないんでしょう